I've caught several pond bass over 5 pounds, including a 6 pound 4 ounce and a 7 pounder, and every single one of them had one thing in common. Today I'm going to show you where they were, what I threw, and it'll help you find spots like this in your own pond. Now, big is relative to where you live. In the Northeast, a 5 pounder is a big bass, and it differs from pond to pond. Your favorite pond's big bass might be a 3 pounder or it could be a 10 pounder, but it doesn't change where the biggest bass like to be. So, starting with spring, I caught two 5 pounders within a few hours of each other. This was late spring, I believe it was June 1st of this year. It was a morning trip, and this area of the pond has a rocky ridge that comes up to about 1 foot or less deep, drops off to 12 feet on this side, drops again about 5 feet over here before coming back up to another rocky hump, which then it drops back down to about 7 feet on this side. I threw this Bill Lewis ATV out where I knew where the rocks were and started bouncing the crankbait off of them. In a few bounces and I stopped reeling to let the bait rise, and when I started reeling again, I thought it got stuck in the rocks, but it was this bass that bit on the pause. Fast forward a few hours later, we were now all the way down the pond, and this area here is 10 feet deep and slopes up to about 5 feet here, with scattered small lily pads and grass throughout. Up here is where the brook runs in, so there's a deeper creek channel up tight to this shoreline. And there's a lay down right here and a log around the point right here. I threw a chatterbait at this lay down, and I had a small bass on that ended up jumping off. But for some reason, I did not give up on the cast, and I did like a little yo yo with it, maybe trying to imitate a fish that had just been bit by a bass, and it's all screwed up now. And I saw this other bass come out of nowhere from where that log is, and wham. Another way to target bigger bass, say in the early spring when spawn is around the corner, is if you're trying to fish around spawning areas and you're catching bass but they're all small. That's usually because the smaller males move up first to prepare the nests or the beds and wait for the females to arrive. So just by looking at this example, if you're catching all small ones up here, back up to the previous point and try there, or the next drop off leading up to these spawning areas. I also recommend fishing the warmest part of the day in early spring, which is usually mid to late afternoon. For summer, I have two 4th of July stories with 5 pound bass. On a hot 4th of July morning, I caught this one here on a buzz bait rigged with a horny toad, in the same place as the one I showed in the beginning of the video on the Bill Lewis ATV, right here in between these rocky humps. The other 4th of July story, my nephew and I were on a pond that is 5 feet deep around most of it, with a few deeper holes in the middle, and it's loaded with weeds like grass and lily pads. We were getting blown all over the place and decided to just stop fighting it and fish wherever the wind took us. It took us across the middle of the pond between all of these scattered smaller lily pads, and there was this very obvious patch of much bigger, thicker lily pads that ended up being near a deeper hole. And I said, hey, let's go check that spot out. So we get there, and he threw this walking bait out by the edge of it, and a few twitches later, he got smashed by this 5 pound bass. Now it's August. We were out in the middle of the pond, and there's this island here with grass humps in these areas that are about 5 feet deep with 10 to 12 feet of water surrounding them. I threw a 13 fishing jabberjaw by this hump, ran it between it and this island's underwater point, and long story short, I caught my personal best 7 pounder. Another August 5 pounder came from up here again, this time on this side of the pond. Shallow grass and pads everywhere here that slopes down deeper from here out. I threw a Whopper Plopper 130 and caught two bass on the same cast. The smaller one hit first, and as I was reeling it in, it jumped twice, and after the second jump, it just got way heavier, and this 5 pound bass joined the party. Are you noticing a pattern yet? If you're still watching, you probably love chasing big pond bass as much as I do, so hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next video. Now we're into early fall, late September. This section of the pond, a huge island with this strip of water on this side of it. It runs about 5 to 6 feet deep and has grass and pads scattered throughout. Down here it goes to the dam. Over here it drops about 12 feet deep, with this part of the bank loaded with laydowns. It's probably the most fished spot on the pond due to these laydowns, and I've even completely avoided fishing it from failing to catch anything out of them time after time, wondering how. But one afternoon I decided to try it again. I was throwing this shower blows as close to the laydowns as I could, and twitchy twitch twitch, kaboom, I caught this 6 pound 4 ounce bass. Late September again, we were here, a big grassy flat. It drops off to about 18 feet over here, and there's grass patches and pads scattered throughout this whole area. This particular pad line has a drop off right at the edge of it. My nephew was throwing a spinnerbait down the edge and caught this nice 5 pounder. And one last 5 pound story, again in late September. I was throwing a spinnerbait on this pond that has an island here with a shallow grassy flat that meets a rocky ridge and comes back up to some more shallow rock. I cast the boat right here, and as it cleared the rock and met the grass, boom, this one ate it. So, what's the one thing all of these spots have in common? Every single one is some kind of shallow cover with quick access to deep water. The biggest bass in any pond will always claim the best areas where they can slide up the feed and back off deep as they please. If you can find that shallow to deep connection in your pond, that's your best shot at a bigger bass. Now, if your pond doesn't really have much cover, maybe it's just a big featureless bowl, there's always something that stands out, even if it's subtle. Maybe one stretch of the bank has a little ditch, a harder bottom, a few extra feet of depth, or an underwater point, or maybe a small clump of grass that the rest of the pond doesn't have, or even an object in the water like a tire or a bucket, anything. Those small differences become the best spot in ponds like that, especially if they're next to deeper water. Every one of my biggest bass came from that same type of a setup, and if you start looking for it in your ponds, you'll start finding bigger fish as well. Just remember the number one rule to catch big bass in ponds: your pond has to have big bass in it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.